On September 6, 2025, a major event unfolded in Bryan County, Georgia, drawing national attention and sparking intense debate across the country. What began as a typical morning in this quiet community quickly escalated into a scene of high drama as law enforcement vehicles and news crews converged on a massive construction site. Federal agents, working in coordination with local authorities, raided the construction site of a new Hyundai-LG battery plant. This facility, still under construction, was set to become a cornerstone of America's rapidly growing electric vehicle industry, promising thousands of jobs and billions in investment. But on this day, the site became the focus of a large-scale operation by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. This was no routine inspection. It was a meticulously planned enforcement action involving dozens of agents and targeting suspected violations of federal immigration law. The raid quickly became one of the largest workplace enforcement actions in recent U.S. history. News of the operation spread rapidly, raising urgent questions about immigration, labor laws, and the responsibilities of major corporations in vetting their workforce. For Hyundai and LG, the incident cast a long shadow over a project that was meant to symbolize the future of American manufacturing and global cooperation. The companies faced immediate scrutiny from both the public and government officials. The event highlighted the complex and often confusing legal landscape that companies must navigate when hiring workers, especially in industries that rely on large numbers of contractors and subcontractors. Understanding what happened in Georgia means looking closely at the details of the raid, the people whose lives were upended, and the broader economic and political forces at play in today's America. This story reveals the ongoing challenge of balancing the benefits of foreign investment and economic growth with the strict enforcement of U.S. laws, a dilemma that continues to shape the nation's future. The morning of September 6th at the HLGA Battery Company site began quietly, with the first rays of sunlight glinting off steel beams and machinery. It seemed like just another day in the relentless march of progress as the factory's construction continued at a brisk pace. Hundreds of workers, many of them regulars, filed through the gates, ready to start their shifts. The air buzzed with the usual sounds of heavy equipment and the chatter of crews preparing for another demanding day. But that sense of routine was shattered in an instant. Without warning, a convoy of federal and state law enforcement vehicles rolled in, their lights flashing as they quickly blocked every entrance and exit to the site. ICE agents, backed by local police and other federal agencies, moved with precision and speed. They fanned out across the sprawling site, rounding up workers and bringing all construction activity to an abrupt halt. Workers were quickly separated and directed to designated areas for processing. Officers methodically checked each person's identity and work authorization, creating a tense and uncertain atmosphere. The scale of the operation was staggering. Officials would later call it the largest single-site enforcement action in the history of the Department of Homeland Security. The entire factory grounds were transformed into a tightly controlled zone. Those unable to provide valid documentation were taken into federal custody, escorted to waiting vehicles as their coworkers looked on in shock and disbelief. The operation stretched on for hours, with law enforcement methodically working through the site. What began as a normal workday had become a scene of intense federal activity, confusion, and fear. News of the raid spread rapidly, with live coverage and updates dominating local and national headlines. It was immediately clear that this was a story with far-reaching implications. For the local community, the sight of such a massive law enforcement presence at a major economic project was both shocking and deeply unsettling. Families worried about loved ones, and business leaders questioned what this meant for the future of the project. The events of September 6th would not only disrupt lives and livelihoods, but also ignite a national debate about immigration, labor practices, and the responsibilities of major employers in America's evolving economy. In the aftermath of the large-scale operation, officials confirmed that 475 workers were detained during the raid, making it one of the largest workplace immigration enforcement actions in recent years. The sheer number of people involved sent shockwaves through the local community and drew national attention to the issue. Most of those detained were South Korean nationals, a detail that raised immediate questions about how these workers were recruited and what hiring practices were in place at the facility. Investigators began to look into whether labor brokers or recruitment agencies played a role in bringing these workers to the United States. and if employers knowingly overlooked documentation issues. Each individual was transported by bus to federal processing centers, where they faced hours of questioning and the start of formal immigration proceedings. For many, this was their first direct encounter with the U.S. immigration system, and the uncertainty was overwhelming. The majority faced allegations of lacking proper work authorization, with some possibly having overstayed visas or entered the country without legal documentation. Authorities meticulously reviewed paperwork and identification, trying to determine each person's status and history. This pointed to a systemic issue within the industry, not just isolated incidents at a single factory. The scale of the raid suggested that gaps in oversight and enforcement may have allowed these practices to persist for years. The legal process ahead for these workers would be complex and daunting, involving immigration courts, legal counsel, and possible appeals. Outcomes could range from immediate deportation to lengthy legal battles, depending on each individual's circumstances. For many, the raid marked a personal crisis, upending lives and families in an instant. Loved ones waited anxiously outside detention centers, hoping for news and fearing the worst. Their stories highlight the human cost behind headlines and policy debates, reminding us that immigration enforcement affects real people with hopes, dreams, and families. The incident underscored the risks faced by foreign workers seeking opportunity in the U.S., and the precariousness of their situation when policies shift or enforcement intensifies. The legal and emotional fallout would be felt for months to come, as families, communities, and employers struggled to cope with the consequences of the raid and its far-reaching impact. The Hyundai-LG site raid was a coordinated effort involving multiple federal and state agencies. ICE led the operation, but the FBI, DEA, IRS, and U.S. Marshals Service all played key roles. The FBI's involvement suggested possible criminal activities beyond immigration violations, such as fraud or conspiracy. The IRS looked into potential financial crimes, like tax evasion or illegal payment schemes. The Georgia State Patrol secured the perimeter and managed local logistics. This multi-agency approach allowed authorities to address a range of violations in one comprehensive action. The seamless coordination demonstrated the government's commitment to enforcing workplace laws. The raid's scale and complexity reflected the seriousness with which officials viewed the situation. The core reason for the raid was simple. U.S. law requires all employees to have legal work authorization. Investigators suspected widespread hiring of unauthorized workers at the site, likely by subcontractors. Authorities looked for patterns of illegal hiring, including fraudulent documents and off-the-books payments. Many detained workers may have entered on visitor visas not permitting employment or without inspection. The raid sent a clear message. The government will enforce immigration laws even at high-profile projects. Compliance is not optional. Violations carry serious consequences for companies and workers alike. In response, Hyundai Motor North America quickly issued a statement. The company clarified that none of the 475 detained workers were direct Hyundai employees, shifting responsibility to subcontractors. Hyundai emphasized its commitment to following all laws and regulations. The company pledged full cooperation with authorities and reaffirmed its dedication to a safe, lawful work environment. By distancing itself from the alleged violations, Hyundai aimed to protect its reputation and reassure stakeholders. The statement was carefully crafted to manage public relations and legal risk. Hyundai's response highlighted the challenges of overseeing large multi-contractor projects. The company's next steps would be closely watched by the public and regulators. The HLGA Battery Company is central to Hyundai's vision for electric vehicles in the U.S. The plant is part of the larger Metaplant America campus, a multi-billion-dollar investment in Georgia. This joint venture with LG aims to create a domestic supply chain for EV batteries, reducing reliance on imports. When operational, the facility will produce enough batteries for hundreds of thousands of vehicles annually. The Metaplant is already building popular Hyundai electric models and aims to ramp up to 500,000 vehicles per year. The project is a major win for Georgia, promising thousands of jobs and economic growth. Hyundai's investment was also a strategic response to U.S. trade policies and incentives for domestic manufacturing. The raid's impact on such a high-profile project made the incident even more significant. The Hyundai-LG raid is part of a broader trend of increased workplace immigration enforcement in the U.S. Recent years have seen a resurgence of workplace raids as a tool to crack down on illegal employment. The government aims to protect domestic workers and deter illegal immigration by targeting employers who hire unauthorized labor. High-profile actions like this send a strong deterrent message to businesses nationwide. The political climate has fueled public demand for visible enforcement of immigration laws. For companies, the risk of raids and penalties is a powerful incentive to ensure compliance. Even major projects tied to national economic goals are not immune from scrutiny. The Hyundai raid is a warning to all employers: follow the law or face serious consequences. The ICE raid at the Hyundai-LG site is a case study in the intersection of immigration law, corporate responsibility, and economic policy. It highlights the need for companies to ensure compliance throughout their supply chains, not just within their own ranks. For workers, the event underscores the precariousness of employment in industries reliant on immigrant labor. The raid forces a national conversation about the role of immigrant labor and the need for a functional immigration system. Economic development goals do not exempt companies from legal compliance. The government's willingness to enforce the law, even at major projects, creates a delicate balancing act for policymakers. The events in Georgia will be studied as a warning and a lesson for years to come. In today's America, legal compliance is essential for sustainable, responsible business.